The philosophy of the mind. Up until relatively recently, psychology was not seen as a science the way that it is today. Rather, it was considered a branch of philosophy until well into the 1800s. If you are familiar with philosophy at all, you may recognize some of the bigger names that are discussed here. Influential philosophers such as Immanuel Kant, René Descartes, David Hume, and John Locke all busied themselves with ways to tackle the mystery of the human mind. Ever the deep thinkers, these philosophers sought to address why we behave the way that we do, coming up with ideas that would become the forefront of modern-day psychology. René Descartes. Even if you are not particularly savvy with philosophers, you are likely familiar with Descartes. Considered the father of modern philosophy, he was responsible for spreading far more than just philosophical ideas or thoughts. He also contributed greatly toward calculus and, more importantly, to this book, the idea of dualism, a concept within psychology that recognizes that there is an inherent difference between the mind and the body. Effectively, dualism declares that the mind is one thing that is not physical compared to the brain, which is physical, and recognizes the split between the two. With his monumental words, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, Descartes tackled the concept of dualism head-on. He recognized that the mind and body had to interact somewhere, believing that the pineal gland was the area through which the mind can interact with the body. In his work, The Passions of the Soul, written in 1646, he declared that there were animal spirits that influenced the human soul. These spirits were known as passions, and there were 6 that he identified. These were wonder, love, hatred, desire, joy, and sadness. As you can identify, these are quite similar to the universal emotions, missing only a few of them. Effectively, the thought was that the pineal gland served as the connection between the soul, or mind, and the body. But the animal spirits could sort of hijack that connection, causing the body to react in ways that are not necessarily intended. John Locke. Continuing along with the theme of philosophers and psychology, we must now look at John Locke. In particular, he was interested in the cognitive abilities of people. In his essay concerning human understanding, Locke attempted to address the foundation of human knowledge. He determined that the mind was effectively a blank slate at birth, with nothing stored within it. Think of the newborn mind, then, as a brand new hard drive that has not yet been hooked up to your computer. He then described that through time, the mind was filled with information and learning via experience. He was determined to reject the commonly accepted idea of innate ideas, such as the idea that all people are born with the ability to do or believe something. Locke, however, rejected that concept and stated that the idea of innate ideas, such as recognizing something as sweet, comes not because humans innately understand sweetness, but rather because the exposure to sweetness occurs incredibly early on, before children are able to begin communicating what they know. Effectively, Locke addressed the idea of learning and knowledge. David Hume. In the mid-1700s, the continuous pursuit for understanding of the human mind continued with David Hume's A Treatise of Human Nature, designed to be a sort of combination between empiricism, skepticism, and naturalism. Effectively, he discussed the idea of ethics in relation to the mind. He described that people were enslaved to their passions, marking a difference between morality versus reason. Effectively, he wanted to address how and why people make the decisions that they do. Hume also addressed his own theory of mind and the passions. He determined that what we would refer to as emotions and desires, Hume's passions, are impressions instead of being ideas. The passions felt fear, grief, joy, hope, aversion, and desire come directly in response from pain or pleasure. Further, his indirect passions, such as pride, shame, love, and hate, are a bit more complex and indirect. Unlike the passions listed previously, indirect passions do not drive behavior, but rather influence thinking. This can be summarized as attempting to identify how our feelings toward situations determine behaviors. While there is far more to Hume than just learning about emotions, this is the most relevant portion to the furthering of psychology. Immanuel Kant. German philosopher Immanuel Kant helped propel psychology even closer to becoming its own proper discipline through his own writing. Kant felt that psychology of his own day was far too out of touch with true human experience, focusing too much on internal processes. Instead, he sought to look into how the mind worked. He wanted to answer questions about how knowledge is attained, how much we can know about an object, or how we could even learn to begin with. In psychology of his time, knowledge was nothing but a replication of the external world within the mind. However, Kant acknowledged that the mind is far too complex to simply be a reflection for sensory input, and instead said that we gain knowledge through cognitive faculties. Effectively, we learn from our environment, but what we learn is not exactly what we see in front of us. It must be interpreted. The mind does not just learn, it receives input, understands that input, processes that input, and then learns from it, all of which are united by the sense of self. Effectively, the mind is a conglomerate of all of the mental faculties coming together.